Hey, what's up guys, it's Mark Yoon and I'm here with another video for you today. So today's video, I wanted to delve a little bit into some of the questions that I've seen arising from the DLC expansion passes for Sword and Shield. I just wanted to give an argument for both sides and see which argument I think comes out on top in the end. Of course, this is completely up to the individual purchaser. I'm not advocating for anybody going out and buying something that they don't want or don't need. If you're happy with the base game, then more power to you. It's just for those people who are questioning everything that's in the expansion pass, wanted to compare what's in it compared to other secondary releases of the games that we've seen for almost every generation, and try and compare and contrast the two to see which one will be the better purchasing option for the actual purchaser himself. So without further ado, let's just jump right into that. So the first thing I want to get off on saying is something that a lot of people have already said, so let's just get this out of the way. These expansion DLC passes would be much cheaper than making a secondary version of each game. If you don't have someone to play the game with, as I think most people do, but if you just buy the games both for yourself to have the entire content of the game, then we're looking at two $60 games, being Sword and Shield. That's not including tax, unless you get them from somewhere like Amazon or Walmart or a couple other places like that give them to you at a discounted $50 rate. Looking at you, GameStop. These games would be $120 to buy both, and that's to experience the entire Pokedex between the both of them and have all the interactions with the extra gym leaders, I guess you would say, that are spread amongst the other two, because I think there's two separate ones in Sword than there is in Shield. Now, this would be obviously much cheaper of a choice, because if you're going with the expansion pass, it would be $30 for each of those versions. So even if you buy both of them, we're going to have $90 and $90, because it's $30 for the expansion pack for both DLCs, including both DLCs, I should say, because I've seen some people getting confused thinking that each DLC pack is going to be $30. It's pretty much $15 each. It's $30 for the whole thing, but there's a separate one for Sword and a separate one for Shield. So you'd be paying about $180 if you ended up going with both games and both DLC. Now, if there were to come out, let's say, with a secondary version of the games, just for the sake of example, we'll call them, I don't know, Sharp Sword and Sturdy Shield, then we're looking at another additional $60 accrued on top of that. So that's a different story, because that's $240, because it would be $60 for each game, so 120 plus 120 is 240. So even with the DLC expansion packs, we have 240 and 180. So there's obviously still a disparity there, but we're saving $60, which is pretty much the price of a whole game itself. That's nothing to sneeze at. It's a pretty decent savings. So we know it's going to save us money off the back, but that's only the first part of it. That's only the initial reason why we would look at something to consider purchasing it. Now, what's included? What is going to give us that oomph to make that $30 worth it, or has it in the past for any other Pokemon secondary expansion? Well, we start with like Red and Blue, right? So we had our third expansion with Pokemon Yellow, obviously. Only thing this did was give us the entire Pokedex. I think there was a little spin on the story at some point. We start with Pikachu, and we also have the starters from the beginning of the game. Access to all three, because I think they're in the wild grass in like Area 2, I believe, or Area 1. I don't remember exactly. But it's pretty much that. And we paid an extra at the time, what, $50, or it wasn't 60. I think it was like $40 or $50 for that whole extra game. And we didn't really get much. Like a lot of people, what we've been saying for generations since Pokemon released in 1996 is, why don't we just wait for ultimately the second version of the game that's going to come out? Now, a lot of people don't like the secondary versions because they're made by a different team than the original team who works on the first. But, I mean, it's still the same thing, practically. Even with, let's say, Crystal or even Emerald or Platinum, they added very little to the actual gameplay mechanics themselves. It kind of just like fused the two games together, gave you like that third extra legendary with that extra little bit of story at the end of the game, and called it a day. That's about it. As much as I love those games, I don't think that's worth $50, or it's definitely not worth $100 or $120 for people to buy the first two and then buy the third one. I would have just waited for the third ones, which I ended up, I think, at some point trying to do, but I still ended up buying the first ones anyway because I just wanted the new generations. But with that as a basis, then they started doing this weird thing with Black and White, where they made a secondary version of each actual individual game. So we had Black 2 and White 2. And I believe in Black 2 and White 2, when I played them, the story was different. It came at it from like different angles. So I think that was their attempt to try and make it worth the purchasing price, the buy-in price of an additional entire game. But it still didn't come out as being completely full of value to me compared to if we just got all that stuff in like a DLC pack, for example. Hint, hint, where I'm going. But then we get the remakes, and the remakes are fine because they're pretty much just like 1 and 2 versions, like for updated consoles of prior generation games anyway. I know we're all waiting for Shino for Diamond and Pearl. But let's hope that they actually give us like a platinum or whatever. But like instead of just a Diamond and Pearl, like one version of the game. But I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. But besides that fact, after White 2 and Black 2, we get into X and Y. And X and Y, I think, is the only generation that actually didn't have a secondary version. It went, it like skipped that, which is really weird, because Y is one of my favorite generations. It's one of my favorite Pokemon games. If you take Y and Soul Silver, they're pretty much, to me, like unbeatable, unless of course you like the adverse, like X and Heart Gold or whatever. But to me, personally, I think the amount of content that is packed into those games is like worth it. But when we move on to Sun and Moon, we get back to this Black and White mystery thing where we have Black 2 and White 2. I mean, not Black 2 and White 2, I'm sorry. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it's the same thing. Like, we had a little bit extra twist of a story with like the Ultra Beasts, and then we have this space-time thing where you go through space and time and you're catching like legendaries and stuff. So that was interesting, but still, was that worth the additional price of 2 extra games? Because now we're talking about 2 games that were already like $50, and now we have to buy 2 more games on top of that, which is another $50. So we're literally spending $200 for the space wormhole stuff. I mean, the space wormhole stuff was pretty much moot at that point anyway, because we had the GTX since X and Y, and the GTX is a lot more easy to get those themselves. Obviously, there's the chance you're going to run into, if you're a competitive player, getting like a Pokemon who's been spoofed or a Pokemon who's been put in from like an action replay or something like that, just a hacked Pokemon in general. But if you're just a casual fan and you're not a competitive player, like, that's not a big deal as long as you're just trying to complete your Pokedex. So, with that being said, I think that we didn't get that much value with those 2. Now, let's take a look at the expansion passes that we're getting for this iteration, for Sword and Shield. Before we jump into that, though, don't you think that, like, if they offered the wormhole space stuff and maybe the extra bit of a story with the Ultra Beast for, like, $20 DLC, instead of spending, like, another $50 on a game, people wouldn't have eaten that up? Because I believe that I would have definitely chosen the DLC over a secondary game entirely, like almost completely entirely. But in Sword and Shield, we have, off the jump, just from what we know about, we're getting 100 Pokemon new, or not new, pre-existing and some new, per DLC pack. But a lot of people have been saying, well, Mark, that's stuff that has already been cut out of the previous game, so we can't include that because that's stuff that should have been in the game from the jump. Whether or not that's the case, I don't think we have enough evidence to go on a straight up accusation like that. I think it leans more towards the fact of like they were building this new engine because it's different from Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, and they literally didn't have enough time to put all like 800 some Pokemon into decks. I don't think the models aren't too different, so it's not like something where you can just port them over from existing files. You'd still have to up-res them and upscale them because the game is meant to be played also on TVs. So think of it from your Game Boy Advance, not your Game Boy Advance, your 3DS XL to a 75-inch like HDR TV. It's like going to be night and day difference if you're going to blow them up to that size proportion. So I think they do have a little bit of an argument there of like why they didn't have like all of the Pokemon in off the jump, and I was upset about that at first until I started looking more into it. But I don't know if I'm necessarily smelling like nefarious reasons why they're trying to like keep it out to put it in DLC. Because to me, when I was watching the Pokemon Direct, they added those in as like a bonus kind of thing. It wasn't more like this is the reason you should buy the DLC, which is what I really want to get into. So Tundra and Arms, like we have these two islands that are going to be part of both expansions. So the first one obviously coming out in June, and the second one coming out in the fall, which is slated to be around November. So have fun like playing that when we're all like getting PS5. So I don't know about that, but it's a bit of a wait between the two. But from what I've seen from the Nintendo Direct itself and from other quotes from magazines and articles and whatnot, we have these two brand new island areas which have been slated to be bigger than the actual wild area itself in the base game. The wild area in Sword and Shield is pretty big too. It covers like a bunch of quadrants, and we're getting these brand new areas that are bigger than that. So without like obviously building onto the game by almost like doubling the size of like the initial land, because you put both those islands together, it's going to be pretty much equal to the entire game, maybe a little bit smaller, but still that's like a huge area to explore, which blows my mind that they're even going to do that. It's kind of like revolutionary for Pokemon, but that's only the first point. Then on top of that, we have additional story. We have new legendary Pokemon with the Kubfu that you're going to train to turn into that other two versions of it, the Water and Dark version. And then we have that, what I keep seeing a joking people calling the Triforce deer, because it looks like, I don't know, thing's got a weird body. But so we have those, and then we have like the whole new Reggie area with like, because these islands are going to apparently include a ton of caves and like isles themselves and like other kind of things, which obviously adds intrinsic value to the pack itself. But we got the Reggie Cave, and there's like two new Reggie forms apparently. There's like the Reggie Electric one, and then like the Reggie Dragon. Looks like it's got a Charizard skull for arms. So that's interesting. We have these new versions of legendary favorites from before. Like we have the original birds with Galarian forms. So we have Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres. And that's only a taste of what we're getting. We may be getting a ton more of that kind of thing too, like different versions of legendaries and whatnot, which I believe they are, which is why the November is such a long pushed back date for the second part of the DLC. Because when you think about it, that's when we're going to get the co-op dens, where we actually, which is a big deal for Pokemon, where we're not only just going to have these co-op raids, we're going to be able to, with a friend, go into these dens and explore the entire den. We're going to be able to catch everything. I don't know if it's together or separate, but while we're doing it in the same vicinity. And then we get to an ultimate Pokemon at the end, be it a legendary or something like that. So a lot of that adds a lot of like intrinsic value to the game. And then for single player supporters, we're getting a ton of new customization options, including haircuts, outfits, and stuff like that. We're also getting like new versions of pre-existing Pokemon. I know we already probably all call it that, the new Slowpoke that transforms into Slowking by the end of the second DLC pack, because you need like 2 items to get him to Slowbro and then Slowking. So I know a lot of us don't count that though. But On top of all this extra stuff we got, now, and I'm probably forgetting some stuff because I'm doing this off the top of my head without a script. And it's running on really long, so I'm trying to cut it short because I know I really appreciate the people who are listening in 15 minutes, but my usual retention time is like 5 minutes, so I doubt it. But anyway, if you are listening this far to the end of the video, in the comment section below, all I want you to do is say Pokemon Plus. We'll just say that. Pokemon Plus will be like our keyword, and that lets me know that you actually made it to the end of the video. So, with all of this stuff that is jam-packed into these 2 expansion packs, if you only have one version of the game, and you bought, let's say Sword, for example, for $60, or I got it for $50 because I got it from Amazon. Let's say you paid $60 for it, whatever, you went to GameStop, I don't know why you would, but let's say you did, and you're paying another $30 on top of that for both DLC packs together, then that's $90. Like I said before, if you're getting all 4 versions, then you're paying $180. But if we had 4 versions of the game, that's $240. So what do you think they would add to the second versions, like let's say a sturdy shield and a sharp sword? What do you think they would add that they didn't add in the past that would make it worth putting out a whole nother game for? Because I doubt they would add this much. They'd probably give us maybe, I don't think they'd give us the new areas. They'd probably give us the new Pokemon added back into the decks, the new forms, and maybe the co-op dens if we were lucky. So we just got to compare it to the past and the precedent that they've set for themselves, and we got to look towards how that would affect everything else. I personally think the DLC pack is a lot better of an option than buying a whole new game, and I wish some people would like pay attention to that more. Like I've seen, like on Angry Joe, Alex went into the whole news thing about how we're just pretty much buying our Pokemon to come back into the decks, and they were kind of making fun of it. But anybody that watches that show knows that like not the utmost amount of research goes into what they're doing. Like I watch their stuff, but usually it's more as a casual entertainment thing. I don't really get news from them. And I've seen a couple other outlets like talking about stuff like that too, especially YouTubers. But if we actually look at everything that's included, I think it really does add intrinsic value. And again, you don't have to buy it. I'm not advocating for you to buy a DLC because it has a negative connotation associated with it because it's been abused in the past, especially by companies like Team Ninja recently with the Dead or Alive games and with EA with every game they've ever made pretty much. So I can understand the negative connotation, and it is ultimately your choice. But I'm interested to know what choice that is going to be made. So let me know in the comment section down below if you're planning on purchasing the expansion passes, if you think it's better than a secondary game, if there's something else that you wish they would have added to it, or you're something that you were surprised that they did add. And that's it. Just leave that in the comment section down below and we'll get a conversation started. I'm planning on doing a user review score for this game, so any comment that we get in this comment section is going to appear in my next video for the user review for Sword and Shield. As followers of mine from the past know that I try to include you guys in my videos. So with that being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. I hope to hear from you soon. Please check out Rich. And as always, guys, stay powered up. Peace.